It is 10 a.m. in Geneva, and it is 9 a.m. in UK, and this is the right time to start our Legend sessions with Mr. Philip King, former Chief Executive of Chartered Institute of Credit Management, and the person who has more than 40 years of credit management career. To me, this is very touchable personally, because I grew up to 26 years in the profession of credit management, and looking at people I'm interviewing in the Legends rubric, I simply understand that how young I am in profession and myself. So thank you very much, Philip, for joining us, and thank you very much for coming and finding time to share your experience and your way in credit with us. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Philip, my first question is quite simple, and I do remember the event with where we did exchange this with other professionals, but I know that majority of people in credit didn't start in credit itself, so that they had other jobs in the very beginning. So may I ask, what was your first job, let's say, after your education, and what was that job?
My very first job as a full-time employee was a civil servant for the UK government.
So okay, so what you do now is not completely new for you. I mean, government relations.
That's true. It was a full circle 40 years later. Yeah.
Okay, and may I ask, how did you get to credit?
Okay, so the history is, and some people listening to this will have heard this before, but I left school at 16 with almost no qualifications at all. My school career was not particularly triumphant, and I found a job in the civil service, which I did for about 4 years, and then I was driving and enjoying driving, so I got a job as a van driver, delivering laundry around northwest London in the UK, and then I became a minicab or taxi driver for about a year around North London. And I asked a friend one day if his company had any van driver jobs going. He worked for a firm of electrical wholesalers. And Brian said to me, no, we haven't got any van driver jobs, but we've got a job in our credit department. You'd like that? And I said, what is it? And he said, I'll get you an interview. So he got me an interview, and I went and met a guy who interviewed me and said, I'd love to give you the job, but I'd quite like someone who had some experience in credit and knew what it was. So, we'll keep you on the books. And I went away and carried on driving. And 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, and it said, are you still interested in this job? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, no one else applied, so do you want it? And so I started in January 1979, working at a firm of electrical wholesalers in their credit department. And that was a real watershed moment for me, because from that moment on, I absolutely fell in love with credit, and I've been there ever since. But it was, people say they fall into things by accident. And I guess that's a good definition of what happened to me, but I like to describe it as saying I found credit management rather than fell into it, because from the moment I touched it, I absolutely loved it, and I've been there ever since.
So technically speaking, because we are speaking about profession, you took the job which no one else wanted.
Correct.
And by mistake, because I technically, when I really entered into credit management myself, that was middle of 90s in Ukraine, and the boss, my future boss, told me that you will be working on overdue loan collection. I was really scared to start with that, but that was okay. And I know you did, I've read a couple of your interviews, at least the one I remember, because to me, let's say later on, about 20 years ago, reading your interview, My Life in Credit, in Credit Management Journal, was really a career handbook, if I may say so. Because I mean, that time there was no knowledge. That the only source of knowledge was Credit Management Handbook from 1993, translated into Russian, because that time I didn't speak English yet. And interesting thing, I was reading, and you were explaining how did you grow up from that credit employee to really a credit manager. And I know you received the resignation sign, which I'm still jealous about, if you remember from my posts on LinkedIn and in social media. But may I ask, what are the one thing or two things or three things which made you that successful in credit management? What are the key factors which ensured your success in credit management?
I think one is luck, being in the right place at the right time, and taking opportunities. But I think fundamentally two things. One is people. So when I started in 1979 working in credit, I started a qualification in credit within 12 months of that, and that was because I worked for somebody, a guy called John Brown, who was my mentor for the first 10 years of my career, who led me and guided me and said, why don't you go and try this and see how you get on? But I look back, and I remember speaking at his funeral and saying that I owed more to him than he would ever know, because there were little things he said to me that prompted me to go and try things and do things. I think without him, I would probably have just done the job for quite a long time. But with his encouragement and guidance, I went and looked for more and did things and did things I wouldn't have otherwise done. And I think the second thing is passion. Because I was passionate about credit management, I always looked to learn more. And you talked about being pre-internet and Google days. I remember going to working in North London, going into the London branch of the Institute of Credit Management, as it was then, and I'd go to their monthly meetings, and I would go with a list of questions I wanted to answer and find people to answer those questions. Now I'd go and Google it for half an hour, but in those days you couldn't. And so I would over the weeks, I would just compile a list of things that I was interested in, and I would go and ask people. And that for me was the passion that drove my career. And throughout my career, I've been passionate about whatever I've done. I tend not to do things by halves. I either get into them or I don't. And because I've always loved credit, I've always been passionate about it. And so I think listening to people and being passionate are probably the two major things.
Thank you very much, Philip. This is really a great answer, because I think I got kind of mark of great people, and those who say that I did it just because of my luck is one of this. This is really a sign of great people. Everybody say there was nothing ensured or really guaranteed my success. The only thing which guaranteed the success was really the luck. And what I hear from you is that passion about credit. Both gentlemen I spoke before in this rubric of legends say that passion to credit management is the thing we share. I share this passion myself, so I can clearly undersign that this happens. But passion is not coming itself. When we analyze that logically afterwards, we find that there is something which fits our expectations or something like that. May I ask what really what are the parts of credit profession, what things you do in credit profession really makes you or made you love it?
I think it's the variety, Andre. I mean, you kindly posted an interview that I did for the Credit Champions thing with ITM Productions last week on LinkedIn. And in that, I said that I was talking about what credit management was, and when you look at the professional credit manager, he's an accountant, he's a lawyer, he's an analyst, he's a diplomat, he's a negotiator, he's a risk assessor, he's a salesman. All of these things come into credit, and credit for me is not a backwater process. It's much more than that. It's the pulsing heart of the business, and so it's all of those things. And I think when you look at credit, it brings a whole range of disciplines into it. And when I look back over my career and think about a day working somewhere as a credit manager, I'd start the day looking at risk analysis and looking at a company and looking at their accounts. And then I'd be talking to a salesman negotiating a credit line. And then I'd be talking to a customer negotiating a repayment plan. And then I'd be, promoting what we were doing to the sales team. All of those things come into credit. And I'm sure that lots of jobs have very similar sort of variety. But credit really is a mixed bag of everything. And no day is the same. And I get really frustrated when I hear people talking about credit being a back-end process. It's right at the front of the business. It's a key part of the business, and I think for me that's what gives it the edge.
Here there is like sub question to that. So you need to be prepared to do many different things the same day, and you are not allowed to say this is not my department or this is not my problem, because what I found in credit management, there is no one behind us. In the end, customers either pay or not, and you need to be prepared to take the whole responsibility for everything which happened afterwards, including what people did before us, because yes, this is not the back end, but this is the last stage of the process. We are the last line of defense. And on this way, or standing on this line, we got successes and we got failures. And if it is not a big secret, may I ask you what you consider as your biggest success in a professional active credit management career within the company, and what was your biggest failure? I mean, you can say this is secret, and I will be silent. So you are allowed to keep your secrets for yourself.
No, Andrew. People that know me know that I'm pretty open about stuff. I'm not afraid to share things. I was thinking about this last week, and I can't think of a single big failure that sort of hangs over me. Mm-hmm. But I can think of hundreds of little failures where things didn't go as they should have done. Numerous things that I look back and I could have done that better. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done more of this. I should have tried harder to do that. Yes. I should have stopped doing something earlier. But there's nothing that I look back and say, oh my goodness, that was the sort of the whole disaster thing. There were lots of things that at the time seemed like a massive disaster, but weren't. But one thing stands out. It's a bit of an anecdote, but I remember I was at a computer manufacturer, and I'd spent months and months working with a company in Dublin that was in real trouble. And we built a plan to keep them in business. They were a distributor for us, so we needed them, but they were in desperate trouble and were on the brink of insolvency for a long time. So I spent a lot of time out there working with them. And in fact, one of my biggest best keepsakes is a letter from them when I left the company, when they said, we wouldn't be here without the efforts you put in to save us, which I really treasure. But I worked really hard with them, and we put together a package with a finance house so that they got paid They got money from the finance house. We took a cut of every deal they did. And over a period of 2 years, we were going to get rid of the debt that they owed us and work our way through it. And it was working really well. And then one day I was on a train to London and I got a phone call. And the company was still there. The plan was still working, but the finance house had gone bust. And that was the one thing that had never crossed my mind. And I remember at the time thinking, why didn't it occur to me that that might happen? And we had to start all over again. And we did save them in the end, and it was a good outcome. But I think, I guess that's indicative of sometimes not looking far enough outside the boundaries of what you're talking about and thinking that you can see everything, but often you can't. So lots of failures, but none that I see as being sort of, terminal. In terms of successes, I was going to say I've had lots, and that sounds a bit grandiose. But lots of little things have gone well. That story of the Dublin company stands with me as one of my successes, because the business did survive, and that was just 10 people in a small business, but they wouldn't still have had jobs if we hadn't managed to work with them. I guess in terms of my professional career, one thing I'm particularly proud of was a time when I was at Vodafone, in the very early days of Vodafone, when they were trying to get business, and everything was about market share. So it was just getting more connections. And we had a sales force going out to sell to direct customers. And we were in a situation where we were getting countless applications for credit, and we were having to turn them all down because they were just awful risk. And we were getting to a point where there was real frustration. The sales force were working really hard. We were saying no to everything, and it wasn't working. And I remember talking to Dun & Bradstreet, who'd introduced a system whereby they gave, in those days, this was quite novel, they gave a pre-approved credit limit based on, or a pre-recommended credit limit based on their analysis. And I talked to Dun & Bradstreet and said, could we convert what they produced and turn it into a sort of number? So to cut a long story short, what we did was and they could produce this data by sort of postcode within the UK. So in this postcode, here are the businesses, and this is what the approved credit limit is. And we converted that to a number of telephone handsets. So I was able to go out to the sales force and say, Mr. Salesman, here's your patch. These are the businesses you can sell to. This one you can give 10 handsets to. This one 50 handsets. This one 2 handsets. And so suddenly they had a list of customers that they knew they could go and sell to. So rather than knocking on doors coldly, they went out to targeted businesses and sold. And that transformed the sales operation at that time in that part of the business. And when I look back, it's nothing particularly major. It's pretty standard practice for businesses now. But in those days, it was quite innovative. And it moved us from a position where we were, at one point, really struggling to sell, to suddenly where the salesmen were really pleased and we were selling, and it was really good. And I guess the other big success I have to mention for me personally was getting the charter for the Institute of Credit Management, which was a huge task, and probably the pinnacle of everything I did.
That you will have a special question, because I cannot avoid it.
Okay.
I cannot avoid it because this is something which we need to discuss in details, and I believe you expected this question about receiving the Royal Charter by ICM. But before that, having this opportunity to speak with you today and reading a lot of things you wrote about credit management, and that was one of the biggest learning in my life, in my professional life. So I suppose to say that, I'm obliged to say that you changed my attitude to credit somehow.
That's very kind of you.
Together with other things, and I will explain which way. Interestingly, I noticed kind of nuance that you were very close in your career. You were very close with sales. and you were working quite close with sales. And the way I transformed it in my life, in my understanding, is that using you as example of a credit manager or any other, many others, not only you, I found that good credit manager is the one who helps salesmen to sell. It's kind of frontline, or kind of, I mean, if we, in military terms, if salesman is an infantry, credit management is supposed to be cannon people, or, artillery. How do you feel this? So do you feel the role of, I mean, I don't say selling whatever it was, whatever way customers pay, whatever risk it is. No, I don't say this, but intention to help to sell, and so to make a transaction, to help a sale to happen, or finding way to say yes to a professional, to a profitable sale. Is that what you were trying to do over your career?
Absolutely. I often say, why do we think credit was invented? Who in their right mind thought that it would be a good idea to say to somebody, here's some goods, take them away and pay me in 30 days. That makes no sense to anybody. If I'm going to give you some goods, pay me now. So why would I give you credit? The only reason I would give you credit is to encourage you to take more and to sell more. Credit is a sales tool. That's the only reason it exists. It makes no sense otherwise. So if we forget that credit is a sales tool, then we've lost our way completely. The thing that makes me most angry is when people talk about sales prevention and credit being sales prevention. It cannot be sales prevention. Credit is making the sale happen. It's a fundamental part of the sale. So yes, it's been a driver throughout my career. I think that that using credit as a way to sell is fundamental to the success of any business. And someone once said to me, one of the members of the CICM said to me, in her business, it was a chemical business, and she said to me, the answer is always yes. The only question is how. How do we do the business? But we always want to do it. And I think that credit is all about that, and working with the sales force to help them achieve sales is fundamentally why we exist. Collecting the money and all of that stuff comes after the event, but initially it's being able to sell. I worked for Olivetti, which was a company that had its whole dealership was a pretty awful customer base, and most of my time in that business was spent working out how we could do a sale. So most of the orders that came to us, the standard answer would have been no. So it was, I spent all of my time working out how we could do it. Sometimes we did escrow accounts, sometimes we did back-to-back deals, sometimes we did end party guarantees, sometimes we did consignment stock. We found ways in order to enable the sale to happen. And that's what I did. And one of my most treasured possessions is my leaving card when I left that company. And the sales director wrote in the card, I wish you all the best. You were the best salesman I never had. And for me, that was such a compliment that he felt that I was supporting his business. And when I joined that business, the credit team had a reputation of being resistant to selling. And when I left, it had a reputation for being supportive of sales. And sales would come to us, and the standard conversation on a Monday morning was, I've got a brilliant deal for this dealer to sell into this council. Any ideas how we can do it? And I would then talk to the salesman, the customer, the end user, and try and work out a way of pulling the deal together. And I think that my Vodafone example of the Dun & Bradstreet database was similar. That there are ways in which you can say yes. Maybe it's only yes on a cash up front deal if it's really severe, but in general there are ways of constructing a deal that mean you can sell. And if you can't, then that's telling you that really you probably shouldn't be doing it. And sometimes that is the case. So, don't get away from the fact that there are some deals that should be turned down. But, the first priority is trying to find a way to do the deal. And I really believe that that's why credit exists. And when credit people stop doing that, then I think they've lost their way.
So,
sorry, I get a bit passionate about that.
No, that's okay. I'm sharing this because what you say, I've read in your interview, then I tried it throughout my career, and I found this works. So it is. I mean, I don't believe you need any confirmation it works because you got your own experience. But I could say I've tried what you did, and I found that it works. And just to be complete with what we said, because very often credit department is called sales prevention or the place where sales die and everything. So may I ask, if we see that, let's say, salespeople in a particular company call credit management or credit manager as sales prevention officer, does that mean that this credit manager is supposed to do something differently?
I think it's about communication and relationships, isn't it? So you have to build relationships with a sales team. You have to win them over. And you have to win them over with practical examples. I'll share a story with you. When I joined Olivetti, they got a reputation, the credit team, for being very resistant. And I formed a new credit team in a new location. They'd moved it away. And we had, I recognized that we had to change the reputation. And I was very lucky. So it's one of those days when luck happened. I went out with a salesman to see a customer that was very valued to the sales team. They had great hopes for it. And I went out to visit this customer who had an office in a porter cabin on a site. And we had a conversation, and it was very clear to me that this was a terminal business. It was not going to survive. It was a really, really bad story. And so I had a conversation with the customer, and they owed us quite a lot of money. And the end of the story was that I got the money off them, and then I closed the account, and I refused to deal with them anymore. And I came away from that, and the sales force went absolutely ballistic. I just closed down their best customer. The sales director was on the phone to the managing director. I was the worst person in the world. I just destroyed the business in one morning. 1 week later, the company went bust. And I'd collected money that morning that we would have lost as a bad debt. And it was about, I think then, £15,000. It wasn't massive, but it was a significant sum for that business at that time. And suddenly, I went from being the worst person in the world to some sort of hero who could predict when a company was going to go bust and managed to avoid it. And that was just pure luck. Just the timing was right. But as a result of that, the sales force then had some trust in me, and my judgment was accepted. And when I said, this is a really risky customer, we have to find a way of doing the business that isn't just open account because we can't be that confident, they believed me. And so I was suddenly invited out to sales meetings to talk to the sales force. I was invited out to salesmen to meet customers, and that was really good. But I think you build relationships over time, and you have to work with the sales force. And I was always eager to get out and meet customers with the sales force and just have conversations so that I knew who I was dealing with. You only know a customer really when you look in the whites of their eyes and see what they're saying. One of my sort of common descriptors is that you only know how strong the balance sheet is when you've walked through the warehouse and looked at the stock and seen how thick the dust is on the boxes. If it's 3 inches thick, they're not selling anything and the stock is worthless. If it's moving over and over and over again, then it's clearly got some value and they're selling. So you find those things out when you just spend time with a business. And so working with the sales force, going out and meeting them is really really important, and that's something that I've always believed we should do. But it's a challenge. Not every salesman is going to, like you and work with you, but there has to be mutual respect, and we have to respect that salesmen know their customers too. I hear credit people talk about salesmen knowing nothing about the customers and all this, and that's not true either. I've had too many salespeople tell me he's a nice bloke, he drives a nice car, he's great fun in the pub, and that means we should give him millions of pounds worth of credit. That doesn't stack. But there's two-way flow of information. I know stuff that you don't know about this customer. You know loads that I don't know. So let's share that.
Yes. May I ask one more question in this respect? Because I want to make this our today's conversation kind of helpful to other credit managers. We just agreed that it is important for credit managers to work with salespeople, and this is all about building communication. And what I found, big number of credit managers do believe in these two things, but they believe that salesmen supposed to come to them and ask for this communication and start building this communication, which I don't believe will work. I think these are us, credit managers, supposed to come to salespeople, supposed to come to business and try to speak with them and ask what help they need and how helpful we could be. Obviously, visiting customers together and lots of other things, but just a simple question: is that us who's supposed to do the first step in this conversation? Is that credit manager who's supposed to do a first step?
You want a simple answer? Yes.
Okay.
It has to be. We as you said at the beginning, we are at the end of the chain, so yes. we need all of that, everything before it, and so it's really important that we're willing to go out and share. And if we're not seen to proactively look for, support and help and to give advice, then the salespeople will consider that they're doing what they do, and why would they need to consult? So it's got to be a two-way channel, and I think it's beyond just sales, Andrew. I remember when we set the team up at Olivetti, I'd been there a couple of years, and what was clear was that we had a massive problem with, apart from the fact that the customers weren't particularly good, we had a massive problem with disputes. We were shipping product, invoicing was wrong, there were massive numbers of queries which were preventing us getting paid. And what I did there was to combine the customer service and sales teams, so that the customer service person, order processing person, would sit next to the credit person, and they'd work together on a batch of customers. What that meant was that when there was a problem with an invoice, someone could turn to the person next to them and fix it. And over time, we got better at those processes, making sure they were right. And when the order processor was talking to a customer and heard that they just won a massive order, or heard they just laid a load of staff off, they would share that with the credit person, who could then use that in their risk assessment and in their collection processes and the way in which they attack the debt. So bringing people together, whether it's Salesforce or customer services or order processors, is all key to the thing. And if we think that credit should sit in an ivory tower somewhere over there, then we're missing the plot.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I did my best to make sure you hear this from Philip King, not from me. Thank you, Philip. Okay. We all know that corporate career, with all its beauty and dynamics, and lots of interesting things, because we are working. I had quite similar experience to what you just said, working with all these people, solving issues in dynamics, helping others, or let's say becoming successful by contributing to success of others, which is extremely romantic. Feeling yourself as a Superman or I don't know, whoever, you know, saver, rescuer, whatever it is. It's very nice. But we all know that corporate career, one day, sooner or later, is coming to the end. And I know lots of people who continue to love credit, even if they stopped already working in credit. And I believe, okay, love is one side, but in order to stay in love, in relationships for long term, for a long time, you need to, one of the secrets of that, I think, is, you know, finding new sides of other person and discover them. And this will make this process, you know, reasonably endless. And speaking with other professionals who stay in credit management for many years, I found that they still find beauties or beauty sides of credit management even after active corporate career. My question is, what beauties did you find? What beauties of credit did you find after the credit, after the active credit?
I guess I've been very fortunate because having run the Institute of Credit Management for 14 years, I've got a huge network of people that I know and I've built over the years. But even before I started working there, I built a big network. And I guess the beauties for me are the network of support that, that we build up over time. So I have many people and colleagues around, you know, around the UK, but also around the world that I know, including you, Andre, who Patrick Connolly, who I've spent a lot of time with over the years. Glenn Bullivan, I spent even more time with. But the people that we get to know and we build networks with, that network of support, I think, is a real beauty of credit. And within that network of support, a willingness to help. And over the years, there have been many times when I've not known the answer to something. But when I haven't, I've always known someone who does. And I've been able to go and find somebody and talk to people. There are people on this call we've seen this morning, Laurie Beagle, Nick King, that I've known over many years, and who are part of that network of people within the credit management community. And I think it is a community. And I think for me, that's the beauty of the whole credit world.
So helping others to get into success.
Yeah.
Quite common, but I'm happy to hear that as well, because I'm trying to do kind of that. And if we come back to the very beginning of your credit career, after the whole story, we know, and you understand that in your today's topics, that I mean, we all make many mistakes, and simply say, okay, I would not make these mistakes if I have this knowledge, this experience with everything, you know, with everything in credit management, I would not make these mistakes. But if you can if you can get back to January 1979, and you are allowed to say one sentence to your very young self, what this would be, what this sentence would be, what would be this advice, the only one advice?
It would be communicate, always watch, always listen, and always learn.
Thank you very much, Philip, for that. And as promised, when we were speaking about the success, and I took it very seriously because I knew how difficult it is to prove that credit management is really important to the company. And speaking with other people, I always use the fact you just mentioned, that finally in UK, in in this 21st century, the Institute of Credit Management received the Royal Charter, which I asked Glenn Bullivant for the explanation that this made credit management profession, equal among equals. So marketing, accounting, finance, and everything supposed to, credit management is to be now recognized somehow as an equal profession. May I ask you how difficult it was? Because everyone in credit management I know tries to prove that credit management is really important for the business. But to me, you are the most successful person in this respect, because you obviously with the team were able to prove this to the highest authority in your country. So may I ask, how did you manage this? And then there will be another question, because this equality with other professions are supposed to be, if we can translate this to those who don't understand British tradition, and I am actually the one who really don't understand what does that mean, Royal Charter. Glenn only said me that Her Majesty is not coming for annual meeting of Chartered Institute, but how difficult it was, and what this really means, getting Royal Charter for those who were not born in the United Kingdom and who don't understand all the professions or all the traditions of United Kingdom.
Okay, so a royal charter is granted, as you say, by the Queen. I say not personally. She does do it personally in a meeting with her Privy Council, but she doesn't get involved in it, obviously, personally. But the royal charter is granted by the Queen. It infers a status on the organisation, and by default, because it's the organisation, it's the profession that the organisation represents, and it gives it a sort of kudos that says that it is governed by Royal Charter, so it doesn't have to file accounts at Companies House. It doesn't have to do lots of things that an ordinary organisation does. We were previously a charity and a limited company. Those things don't have to be done because it is reckoned to be of sufficient status that it is able to govern itself and report only to the Queen in the event that anything goes wrong or whatever. How difficult is it? It was the most difficult thing I've ever done, and it was also the most satisfying thing I think I've ever done. If I just talk you through the history, that probably makes a bit of sense. Back in the 1990s, well before I was involved, I was involved with the Chartered Institute of Credit Management then, but I wasn't working for it or part of its governance. Back in the 90s, there was a clear decision that said we would never get chartered, and it was not even worth thinking about. In 2001, there was an article in the ICM magazine then that said there was no way we were going to get the charter within the foreseeable future, I think were the words used, and it was never even thought about. When I came in 2005, I had an aspiration that said, if we could get a charter, that would be really significant. And one of the things I noticed from my conversations with government, because we were trying to work hard with government, was that we didn't get the respect from government that other professions did. And I felt that a charter would help to change that. So I went to see the Privy Council, which is the organisation that does all the sort of background administration to getting the charter, and present it to the Queen in 2006. And they basically just said, no, don't even go there. You'll be wasting your time. So I went away and did a lot of research and talked to a lot of other organisations that had got charters and tried to understand, what we needed to do. And then in 2009, I went back to the Privy Council and talked to them again and talked through it. And this time the answer wasn't just no, it was some years away, but there is a possibility you could get there if certain things happened. So I went away and looked at what those things were, and we started putting together the building blocks that would change things. And they weren't fundamental shift in behavior, but they were ways of capturing data and describing ourselves and the way we presented ourselves, and various things that I thought might move things a bit. 4 years later, I went back to the Privy Council on the 1st of May 2013, and I said, I think we're ready to apply for chartered status. And they said, yes, you are. So let's start the journey. And I won't bore you with a great amount of detail, but we had a spreadsheet with about 450 items on it of things that had to be done in various ways. I mean, lots of very, very procedural things, but loads of things that had to be done. It was a massive undertaking. We had to involve a barrister who gave us freely of his time to help us talk to things. We had to go and get supporters in government to support us and write letters endorsing us. We had to go and find other professional bodies from accountants, lawyers, and marketeers and so on, who would support us and give us letters of support explaining why they felt we were worthy of applying for a charter. We had to get a whole load of data and information and reams of things, and then present things in a very legalistic, formalistic, British way of working that had to be done in certain ways. And we worked through that spreadsheet, doing things, ticking them off, working our way, and we got to a point where you put an application in that goes off to a team of informal advisors. They come back with some questions. You then have to go out and issue a public notice in the Law Gazette, which gives people the right to challenge your application. When that period has expired, you can then go out again and say something. We went through all of those things and got to a point where we felt ready to go the next step. I can tell you that early in 2014, Brexit was on the horizon. Mm-hmm. And the Privy Council is quite a small team who do the work. And my advisor there said, this is all great and you're moving in the right direction. But I'm sorry, it wasn't Brexit at all. It wasn't Brexit. It was the Scottish independence 2014. Brexit came later. It was Scottish independence. And that vote was in 2014. And the Privy Council said to me, this is all great, you're going in the right direction, but I need to warn you that if the vote for Scottish independence votes for independence, then you can forget your charter for 5 years, because the Privy Council will only be able to worry about the whole breakup of the UK into its constituent parts and all the work that will involve, and nothing else will happen. So we were working our butts off to get to a point, knowing that if that vote went the wrong way, we would have wasted all our time and would be able to, nothing would happen. And that didn't go the wrong way, luckily, and things were good. But at each stage, you submitted paperwork, they looked at it, they came back to you, they looked at it again, they asked for some tweaks, you went and tweaked things and so on. And I remember being in a conference in Europe. I think it was Amsterdam, it might have been somewhere else, but it was in Europe. And we submitted our paperwork, and the Privy Council meets on a regular basis. It meets, I think it's 10 times a year. So we were told that if we got to the July Privy Council meeting, in time for the July Privy Council meeting, they would submit our application, but it had to be signed off by the middle of July, I think it was, for that to happen. And I got a call, and it was from the Privy Council, and they said, we've got your documentation, it's fine, but there are some things that need to be changed. And the advisors are saying that they are fundamental. If they are not changed, then you'll have to wait till next year. If they are changed to our satisfaction, you might be able to go forward. And we'd always set our sights on going live with the Royal Charter from the beginning of 2015. It worked with our governance, it worked with our accounting, a whole load of things, and that was what we were aiming for. So, so I remember going back to my room in the hotel, looking at this email, and there were fundamental changes to what we drafted and the wording we drafted. And I remember to this day working through the night, exchanging emails with the barrister, tweaking, and these were really detailed, silly things that to you or I would mean nothing, but to the lawyers involved were fundamental, and to the government, bureaucrats were really important. So playing with words and tweaking things around and changing the order of things in the document and the Royal Charter draft, and we submitted it the next morning, and thankfully that was accepted. And then something happened, and the next meeting of the Privy Council didn't happen, or we fell off the bottom of the agenda and didn't get considered, and we thought we'd completely lost it. And then we managed to get on to the Privy Council meeting on the 5th of November 2014, and at that meeting we were successful. But even then, that gave us sort of 2 months until the beginning of January when we wanted to go live. Even then, there were massive hurdles to jump. So we had to pay some money to the House of Lords to do the seal on the charter. So I remember ringing them and saying, where do I send the money? And they said, no, you can't transfer the money. We have to have a check. And I said, well, where do I send the check? No, you have to deliver the check by hand, and it has to be delivered to the Privy Council's office in the House of Lords. And we need that by next Wednesday, or the document can't be prepared and it can't go live. And I remember rushing down to London, getting a check drawn and taking it in. It was only £110, I think. It was sterling. It wasn't. And taking it in. And then we had to arrange for you have to get so many copies of the draft to be checked, and they have to be proofread by 5 different people, 3 of whom have to be independent. It's just it's a British legalistic. I don't know what the word is, but it's a vortex. And then finally you get it. And I remember going down to London to collect the printed charter on vellum. Just before Christmas in 2014, it was the 23rd of December, and if I hadn't got it on the 23rd, I couldn't have got it till the 6th of January because the offices were closed down between Christmas and New Year. Yeah. And until we'd got that, we couldn't say we'd got the charter formally. We had to have that in our possession. So I went and collected it, and then we announced the charter on the 1st of January 2015, and from then on, we had it. But it was the most incredibly complex bureaucratic journey, a lot of which you could look at and say, what's the point of that? But the point is that's the whole essence of the Royal Charter concept, is that it is this very legalistic British bureaucratic process that you have to get to. And there were many times when I thought, if I'd known what this journey was like, I would never have left home. We would never have started it. But from where you started this question, getting the Royal Charter, suddenly government did listen to us. They did recognise us. Having a business card that said Chartered Institute of Credit Management made a massive difference in conversations I had with government ministers and with government bureaucrats and with civil servants. And it does put us on a par with other professions. And I think that's really important for the profession. And I think it gives us, something we can be proud of and should be proud of.
I believe so. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it is pretty much so. If my use of English words is correct. But thank you very much for sharing this amazingly interesting story about the Royal Charter. But what I've heard, so just correct me, this will be my last question before we go to the questions from our audience. If I understand correctly, all this hard job, all this long time, you never think, so you were always confident, always sure that Royal Charter really worth it, really worth all these efforts, everything you did, because to me this is the only way to do it. Never doubt that what you do is really important for the profession, for the organization, for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said at the beginning that one of my qualities is commitment and passion. And if I believe in something, I'm committed to it. Then I'm determined to make it happen. And I think for me, once I'd made the decision that we really should try and do this, there was no going back. It was, I'd convinced myself, and I say me, the governance of the CICM was convinced that it was the right thing to do and it was worth the effort and we should go for it. Was I confident that we get it? No, I wasn't. There were always conversations where I just felt suddenly someone's going to say, sorry, this isn't for you, go away. But I think from in my heart, I knew it was the right thing to do. And if you believe it's the right thing to do, then you just throw everything at it and you keep persevering. And I was never in any doubt that it was the right step. And for me, it was always a momentous step. Once you've got it, you've got it. So it was a real watershed moment for the profession.
That's by the way how belief and how confidence changes things in the world. Philip, thank you very much for my questions. And ladies and gentlemen, as I announced in the beginning, we still got several minutes of our Q&A sessions. And if you have questions to Philip, please type them in chat or raise your hand and I will unmute you so you can ask your questions. Philip, may I ask how much time we have from your perspective?
I'm semi-retired, Andrei, all the time in the world.
Okay, so all time is ours, but maybe we will restrict it to several minutes. I mean, I was scared about Philip myself. Just I was scared. I was really nervous before this interview because I despite the fact we already know with Philip each other, for quite several years, but we still got. But I found a way to to deal with this. Philip, there is a question from Ennis. How do you think COVID has impacted the credit profession over the last year? What changes do you think it has brought or will bring for the better? Is there changes for better thanks to COVID, if I understood correctly?
Okay, so I think COVID has impacted credit in the same way as it's impacted every other facet of business. The ability to walk down a warehouse and look at the stock hasn't been there because we couldn't get out and about. We were locked down. The ability to meet with customers has gone, so we've had to move to Zoom and so on. I think a couple of beneficial things. We've moved from face-to-face to Zoom, but we've sort of bypassed telephone in the middle of that. So before COVID, we would either go and meet somebody or we'd call them. Now we always Zoom them. When someone says, I want to talk to you, they say, I'll set up a Zoom call or a Teams call with you. I don't quite understand that. It seems to me we've got a bridge too far. But what it does mean is that when we talk to customers on Zoom, at least we're looking into their face rather than just talking to their voice. And that's got to be a slight benefit. I think moving forward, we're going to be in a more hybrid world, which we keep hearing about. So we're going to have this mix of meeting and virtual. And I think that will mean that we manage to talk to more customers. So whereas before we found, the key customers, we go and meet, the rest we talk to by phone or in writing. Now maybe we talk to more because we have more capacity to do that. I think it's made us more, it's made businesses more resilient and more aware of what's going on around them. And I would like to think that it's raised the importance of credit, because cash flow has been more important than ever. As we move into 2022 with, the problem with shipping costs and the Brexit documentation and the, availability of raw materials and all of the things we're seeing that are causing difficulties for business, cash flow is more important than ever. And that means that credit is more important than ever. And I would hope that one of the impacts of COVID is that, credit will ever more be getting a seat at the table where it's important.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that answers Tim's question, but
yes, thank you, Tim. Thank you very much for the questions. It's amazingly interesting. Another question from Laurie Beagle. Good morning, Philip. You were the interim small business commissioner. How would you sum up your time in the job?
Thank you, Laurie. Yes, I was. I was asked to do the job by the minister for 6 months to help government out of a bit of a crisis. It ended up being 17 months because of COVID and the inability for them to recruit a replacement. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It wasn't what I expected when I went in. I thought I'd be out and about meeting people for 18 months. As it was, I sat in my office in front of the computer screen for 18 months. I did 120 webinars in about 11 months. I did, I don't know how many conversations with people and organizations and so on. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think there were two things that I would take away from it. One was that I learned much more about what makes small businesses tick and the challenges they face. And so I became much closer to small businesses. That has influenced what I'm now doing now in semi-retirement. The things I'm doing now are very focused on supporting small business. And I think that came from the small business commissioner experience. And the other thing was that I talked to the chief execs and chief financial officers of many big businesses in the UK and some overseas, high street names where because I had the label small business commissioner, they were willing to talk to me. And the minister and I would often have conversations with the leaders of big businesses. And what it told me was that there was a real disconnect between what the big business saw and what of the small business and what the small business saw and the small business. And I could recount many conversations when effectively the big business was saying, but these are just rows on a spreadsheet. We'll pay these invoices in a few weeks. What's the problem? And when I said to them, but this is a small business that can't put cornflakes on the table on Monday morning because you haven't paid that particular invoice. And I would see lights go on in their eyes and they'd say, we've never thought about it in those terms. Yes, of course we can pay them more quickly. We'll do it this afternoon. And there were several times when I persuaded a large business to make a payment to a small business, almost within an hour, just because they could and because they realized the importance to that small business. And I saw that save jobs. I saw it save people's careers. I saw it save, families' livelihoods. And I think being able to intervene in that way and being part of those discussions was really important. So I guess the third thing that I learned from the Small Business Commissioner's role was the challenges of dealing with government and being immersed in government and so on, which I'll not go into here, but can be quite frustrating.
I just want to extend a bit of the question from Laurie, because I just wanted to reconfirm with you. You started your career working for government, and you were working after the commercial or corporate credit career. You're still working for the government, so you are one of the exceptional, what we can call credit politician, but in very positive way, because whatever people think, I believe there is always a way to do good things wherever you are. It's just a question of attitude. But does that mean you were kind of politician or things like that, or you didn't, or you never seen this like this?
No, no, I don't think I'm a politician. I hope I'm not a politician. In the current climate of politicians, I think their name is somewhat sullied. No, I think my days at the beginning of my career were very much, I was a form filler for government. I didn't understand government at all then. I think working with government is interesting, and there may well be some civil servants on this call. I don't know, but government is a cultural long way away from most business, and it's a different way of working. And I think if you're working with or in government, you've got to understand that and recognise the way in which government and politicians work, and that means you've got to behave differently in order to get them with you, bring them with you, get things to happen. But I don't think that's any different from working in business, when business people are different. Some business people are introvert, some are extrovert, some are very gung-ho, some are very conservative, and you've got to treat them differently. Salespeople, are very different from customer service people. You've got to recognize your audience and adapt it accordingly.
Thank you very much, Philip. Yeah, diplomat. I mean, Laurie corrected me. Diplomat, not a politician. Laurie, thank you very much. I believe I didn't offend Philip, because I have always to apologize, because English is a third language for me. So I don't use, I know I'm not always using the words in their correct meaning. My apologies if it is necessary.
I wish I was as good at my third language as you are, Andre.
Thank you. So we got a question from Tiagi. Have you at any time over your career thought that giving some basic credit review training to sales team will help you in better credit control?
Absolutely. So credit people need to understand what makes sales tick. Sales people need to understand what lies behind credit decisions, and to do that. The guy I talked about, who was my mentor right at the beginning of my career, I remember he used to do a training thing for the sales force based on some widgets and the impact of giving extended credit. And it just, the model demonstrated that if you gave 60 days rather than 30, you run out of money on day 35. And I think salespeople need to understand that. And one of the reasons I used to enjoy going out with salespeople was that you could chat in the car or on the train, and you could share with them examples and experiences of things that had gone wrong. I was criticized early in my credit career for going to too many creditors meetings. Some people will remember the old Section 293 meetings when businesses went bust. But I used to, when I used to justify going to those meetings, other than making a point or making the case for our business, I used to go because I said I could learn something from every previous insolvency. I added it to my list of things to watch for. So when I looked at a new balance sheet, I'd see whether there was anything on there that I'd seen on a previous balance sheet of a business that had gone bust. And sharing those experiences with salespeople was really valuable, because the salesman would say, this guy's got a fantastic house. I remember a guy saying to me, yeah, this guy's got a brilliant helicopter. He's really worth loads of money. We should really deal with him. I remember saying to him, but who owns the helicopter? He said, well, he does. So I said, well, what does the business own? And when that business ultimately went bust, it was discovered that the business was financing the helicopter that the guy was using. And that was one of the reasons the business went bust. And sharing that sort of story with a salesman helps them to understand what lies behind the businesses they're dealing with, and it broadens their horizons. So yeah, absolutely. Some training for salespeople is really important, but let's not call it training. let's call it just sharing experiences. Let's do training, but let's not say they're going on a training course, because they won't like that. Give them something that they'll enjoy. Just tell them some stories and train them that way.
If I'm allowed to simply undersign what I said by Philip Piaggi, is that I used to train salespeople myself, and I could say that one single day I received a confirmation from a sales director that those salesmen who are aware about credit become better salesmen. This is, by the way, what was confirmed by Philip's career, because he was recognized as a salesman, never been one.
Let me say, Andre, I am the worst salesman. I couldn't sell anything. I am a hopeless salesman. What I think I hope I am is an understander of people and have an ability to communicate with them. But I will never sell anything to anybody. Ask my wife. I'm hopeless at selling anything.
No, that's okay. Once I said the same thing to my colleagues in to my colleagues in sales when I was training them. I said, I used to say that if I'm able to say, I would never become a credit manager. And after the training, after a couple of things we did together, one of these key account managers told me, never say you are unable to sell. Never say that, because that's complete lie. Thank you, Philip, for your introduction to the current SMBC. Had great conversation and also the encouragement for my SME training courses. I don't believe this is a question, but Anita, thank you very much for commenting.
Thank you, Anita.
Well, we still got maybe 5 minutes. If you have questions, you can raise your hand and or type them, because we would need to wrap up quite soon. While we are waiting, may I ask one more question? Because this conversation is interesting, because selling is actually convincing, and I even found that technically speaking, I read that from a credit management journal, from one of the articles. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the author, who said that the only difference between sale and collection is only the fact that customer could not say no to when we collect, and they are absolutely allowed to say no after all the efforts of the salesman, just because they are not obliged. And this makes collection work much more easier. But what I found is that salesmen, if they train, become really, really effective collectors. Have you seen in your career salesmen collecting cash?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I know I can think of some salesmen who recognize from the very beginning of their relationship with the customer that getting paid at the end was really important. The old saying that a sale isn't a sale until it's paid for. Who really recognize that. I can also think of many salesmen who couldn't see beyond their next bonus and didn't care about whether or not we got paid. But in general terms, I think I can think of some salesmen who would regularly go out and collect checks for us, because they saw that as part of the process of managing their customer. And when they went and collected a check at the end of the month for me, they also got the chance to talk to the customer and try and make some more sales. So it was, it's part of the relationship. Credit is about, credit is part of customer services. When a customer is called and you ring them to say, will you pay me? You're also saying, are you happy with the relationship? Are you happy with the products and everything else? And the good salesman recognizes that complete relationship, the holistic relationship that exists. So when they go to sell, they're also going in to collect the payment. They're also going in to make the next sale. They're also going in to learn what the customer's doing in the future that will enable them to plan their selling strategy. So yeah, good salesmen absolutely see it as part of their brief.
Yeah, thank you very much, Philip. Because it is quite common, managing credit through the sales force is quite common in Russian-speaking environment, but in Western Europe, it is not that common. But thank you very much to simply sharing with us that, it works. It also works. It equally works. We got a question from Tarun. Is it necessary to have an accounting background to become successful credit manager? What is your opinion about this?
I don't think it's necessary. I in my career, I did a simple accounting qualification, a simple credit analysis qualification. Then I did the ICM qualification, and then I did an accounting qualification. And then when I was 40, I did an MBA. And I always thought that an accounting qualification would be useful because understanding the nuts and bolts of accounts is useful. But is it necessary? I don't think it's certainly not vital, and it's not necessary. But any knowledge helps. So in my MBA, I did marketing and statistics and a whole range of things, and all of those helped my credit career as I went on. So the more you can learn, the better. And there's no doubt that if you have an accounting qualification, it will help because it will give you a better understanding of what lies beneath the numbers you're looking at. But is it necessary? No.
Yeah, I think Maxim Gorky, it's a Russian writer, who said that there is no unnecessary knowledge. Every piece of knowledge is necessary, and accounting. Just looking throughout my, if the person wants to stay in credit management for quite long way, and needs to do it. Ground, with real ground. Accounting is important to be, in the knowledge pack, but I couldn't say this is completely necessary.
Bear in mind, of course, that most of the credit qualifications including an accounting element.
Absolutely.
So there's an element of accounting in the CICM qualification, so you get it that way. So
I did it. I did it with ICM because I was going through the ICM education process, and I could say accounting is really in the grounds of credit management, because what can we do without accounting? The same story for the law, the same story for other things. So credit, as Philip already mentioned today, is actually multifaceted, multilateral thing to do. We got sales, we got customer service, we got treasury, we got accounting, we got finance, we got general manager, very often public relations, and so on and so forth. And we need to have a bit of knowledge in everything of that. Philip, last question for today, because I don't want you to release it. I mean, to me, every interview is so touchable to myself because I'm still very deeply in love with credit. Any final word, any advice to credit managers? Because, I mean, we believe that, I personally believe that with this series of legends, I try to make a bridge between your generation of credit managers and the people who just become credit managers. And we need to make sure, I believe my role is to make sure that this transfer of knowledge between generations is going on. So what would you advise after all of the years in credit to those who just become credit managers, credit controllers, credit analysts, and any other part of credit, its ancillary services?
Okay, can I say two things, Andre?
Even three things would be okay. I mean, whatever number of things you would like to say.
Okay, let me say first that I'm now 65. I'm semi-retired. I'm doing some stuff with SMEs and cash providers and stuff, which I'm really enjoying, which is still living my passion, which is great. But When you asked me what my successes were, one of the things I'm most proud of is my 3 children and my 6 grandchildren. And now I get more time to spend with them. And to anybody that's starting on a career, never lose sight. I've got a wife of 43 years. I've got kids that are 37 to 34 and 30, grandkids. Never lose sight of the fact that there is more to life than just your career. And I'm sure you, Andre, and I'm sure most people listening to this will look back at some points of the career when they've sacrificed the family for the career. And you have to do that sometimes, but never lose sight of the fact that life is multifaceted. And the family are just as important. So make time for them and get a balance. But then back to the professional piece, I would say what I said earlier, to anybody starting on their career, never be afraid to try, never doubt yourself. You know, if I'd never done anything that I thought I might not be able to do, I would never have done anything. I'd still be driving a van around London. You know, I went into a job, I had no idea what it was. I had no idea what credit was, but I thought, well, why not give it a try? and I loved it. So if you don't try, my middle grandson always says to me, if you try, you can. I won't tell you in what context he says that, but he says it quite a lot. It's one of our favorite sayings, and it's true. So never be afraid to try stuff. But I come back to my point earlier, which is communicate, watch, listen, learn from people around you. We can learn from what's going on around us, what people are doing, and learn from people that you see. Learn what's good and learn what's bad. Learn what to avoid and learn what to do. But that's all around communication.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Philip. Ladies and gentlemen, today I personally had a chance to touch the live legend of credit management, Mr. Philip King, and I'm happy to have a chance to share this connection and communication with you. Please stay in touch with us. Our series will continue, and let's have better credit for everybody. And as we could say this in French, bon crédit.
Thank you so much, Andre.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to speak with you. See everybody around. Please stay with us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.